Welcome to the Oxygen Advantage podcast with your host, Oxygen Advantage founder Patrick McKeown. With the Oxygen Advantage podcast, we aim to show how functional breathing is an essential part of a healthy and well-balanced lifestyle. Each episode, we meet experts in their field from around the world and talk about their lives, their experiences, and how they learned the importance of breathing. Join us and get inspired. Get the Oxygen Advantage.
Dermot Whelan, for our international audience, you may not know him, but he's kind of a household name here in Ireland. And he was a radio DJ, a TV celebrity, I'll call you that, Dermot. And an individual who really got into meditation back in 2018 and then into breathing and then changed his life and decided to get out of the rat race while the rest of us are stuck in it. And this is all of the stuff that we want to kind of untangle from Dermot and see those nuggets of wisdom. Because even when I had conversations with Dermot, he's telling me all this stuff. I have to confess, I'm still busy and wrecked. And I shouldn't be. And I shouldn't even be saying that. So Dermot, it's a pleasure to have a conversation with you. You're based in Dublin, and just a bit about your background.
Yeah, Patrick, it's an absolute pleasure to be on the podcast. You know, I'm a big fan of your work, and hi to everybody listening. Absolutely love the podcast and the guests that you have on it. So it's a great honor for me to be on it. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. As you mentioned, I released my book, Busy and Wrecked, in the last few months. And it's been a wonderful journey for me in terms of, you know, writing the book has been a great way for me to actually really make sure I'm putting into practice the things that I'm preaching, you know, as often happens with these kinds of projects. Nobody's perfect. And particularly people who are writing in this space, you know, sometimes I think the image of people, you know, sometimes in this space can be of perfection, particularly on social media and all that. And I've never I hope, given the impression that I am a perfect specimen who always manages to balance work and personal life and all those things perfectly. But through my own experiences over the last 15 years or so, like many of us, I've learned the hard way, and I do my best to put things into practice that I know can help, that science tells us can help, but also through my own personal experience and you know, other people's stories have been shown to work. So yeah, it's an exciting time for me.
And you say you learned a hard way. And does it take that? Like, you know, I think sometimes one has to be pushed almost to the limit before you say, this demands change. And now you're going to go with change. Or the other alternative is the frog in the boiling water. And the temperature is getting hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter, and you don't even realize the next thing is the frog is cooked. So you felt that here was my limit, and that's it, and you don't care. You have nothing to lose now at this point. Do you think, is that the way it's going to happen with everybody, or can it happen without reaching those limits?
Well, I guess that's why we all write these books, is because we want other people not to have to go down the same road that we have. You know, for me, you know, my story began with a panic attack in the mid-noughties on the way to perform at a comedy festival, and I was drinking too much. I had no concept of stress management, of breathing, of how my body was reacting to stress, the particular things that, you know, I mentioned in the book. I call them peace pinchers, the things that were really stealing any sense of peace that I had, and all these well-intentioned habits that weren't working for me. So it came from panic attacks, from falls when drunk, from dealing with overwhelm and burnout from work, from saying yes to everything. And I suppose that's why we end up writing these books, or trying to help people, is because, you know, I feel that I can see it in friends of mine. I'm sure you can as well. You know, when you see somebody breathing incorrectly, or you feel like, oh man, you know, if I could intervene here, if I could give them some information here, it might save them from hitting that point where they feel like the wheels are falling off, you know. So I think part of the human experience is naturally, living through times that are tough, and we learn lessons from that. But I think the way the world is set up at the moment, Patrick, as you know yourself, is for striving and doing and achieving, and productivity is rewarded now more than ever, I think, ever in history. And rest and recovery is very much overlooked, unless you're a professional athlete or in that space where they really do appreciate that we need rest and recovery to foster that real resilience that will help us in those those particularly stressful moments. So um, you know, uh, yes, I do think that it's natural that we experience setbacks and tough times, but particularly for men, I think we tend to wait until we hit that crisis point, that the wheels are falling off and we go, oh God, maybe I do need help. What's really interesting is, like yourself, I do a lot of talks in companies, and they're constantly trying to get the message out to their employees that they have these employee assistance programs, these EAPs. And they're desperately trying to get them, lads, will you use them? There's so many resources there. There's financial advice and there's, mental health advice and all kinds of things. But they find that people don't reach for those resources, even though they're free and right under their noses, until the wheels are falling off, until they're in crisis point, particularly men. And I think, whether you're in a company or not with one of those programs or not, this is how we're naturally set up, is that a lot of the time, you're mentioning the frog in the boiling water. We don't realize that we're in crisis until we wake up one day. And like I was, in 2017, thinking, how am I going to get through the day? How am I, never mind how I'm going to get through a 3-hour live radio show. How am I just going to get to the end of today without losing it? And that's a scary place to be. So I guess the reason I wrote my first book, Mindful, and the latest book, Busy and Wrecked, is so that we don't hit that point. Yes, thank you. So at least we can put things in action and put things in place that can hopefully steer us away from that crisis point and help us to make the landing a little bit softer.
Is it kind of an effect, like in terms of stress is perceived, and what one individual can handle is not necessarily what another individual can handle. But yes, yet there must be markers across both individuals. How do you measure stress? Like when somebody says they're stressed, is it just a word that's sometimes threw out there and because it's kind of fashionable or the way to be? Or is there a way that an individual can kind of draw in on themselves and say, okay, yeah, I'm feeling stressed, that there's some tangible measurement that can kind of put me in this graph? I know there's the combat operational stress code, but what do you do, like when you're talking with people, in terms of that measurement, so people kind of get an idea of where they are at? Because of course, men too, like I spent 26 years absolutely stuck in my head. And when you're so disconnected from what's going on, you're not going to know, because this is going to overrule this, One, the mind is going to override the body, and the mind is going to keep on telling us to go. So what do you think if, say, somebody is listening here and they're feeling, well, I'm kind of not sure if I'm stressed or not? Is there some markers there?
That's a brilliant question, because stress manifests differently for everybody. Some people, will get stressed out at just having what other people would consider, a very reasonable amount of things on their plate. And that's why, tuning into our bodies, into our breath, taking a pause, as well as de-stressing us in the moment, it also allows us to start to listen to the little signals that our bodies and our minds are sending us around stress. And that's something that I was completely unaware of. I was deaf and blind to what my body was trying to tell me. This is why I ended up lying at the side of the road in Kilkenny having a panic attack, because I had ignored all the smaller signals. And it was up to my body then to go, do you know what? He's not listening at all. Let's give him a big signal that he can't ignore. So in my book, Busy and Wrecked, I wanted to find out exactly how stress manifested for different people and how a sense of busyness and overwhelm manifested for people. Because as you rightly point out, it is different for everybody. So I did a survey for all my subscribers to my website, dermotwhelan.com. And I asked them those kinds of questions. How does it manifest for you? And so I put confessions of the busy and wrecked at the top of each chapter in my book. And some of them are really funny, but also there's a kind of a poignancy to them because when I was reading them, I was laughing, but I also wanted to cry because I just got this sense of so many of us are just doing our best. We're muddling through the day. We're feeling overwhelmed and we're doing crazy, weird things as our brains and minds are doing their best to keep up with us. So, for instance, just randomly, chapter 9 of the book, uh, one of the subscribers to my website said, I once sat into the car and literally could not remember which pedal was the accelerator and which was the brake. And on several occasions, I've walked around looking for my phone only to realize I was talking on it. So, you know, there's a great example of a brain that's trying its best to stay functioning, under pressure. So for that particular person, obviously, a feeling of doing silly things, being unable to remember the simplest of things, and that's a great example of how stress was manifesting for that particular person in that instance, and that can be worrying too for people when they're like, oh my God, I think I'm losing it. you know, there's, the book is full of instances of people, uh, putting things in the fridge that don't belong in the fridge. There's a lot of car keys going into the fridge for some reason, So those are kind of funny instances. But then, over time, that can be worrying for people. As I say, you're thinking, oh my God, I can't remember anything. So, I guess in a long way of answering your question, stress manifests differently for all of us. So it's nice to take a stock of, okay, well, how does stress manifest for me? Is it crappy memory? Am I forgetting appointments? Am I forgetting to pick my kid up from the school? Am I constantly running around in a sense of, oh, Jesus, I forgot to do the, is it irritability? This is a big one that I hear again a lot from men, is that they feel a great sense of guilt and shame around how they are at home in particular. For a lot of us, we keep it together during work. There was a woman sitting in the front row of one of my talks recently, and she asked me the question saying, I think I'm okay in work. I feel like I'm on top of everything in work. It's when I come home that's the issue. I find myself being really irritable. Is there anything I can do in that situation? So a lot of the time, stress manifests in that we're on it in work, but it's when we come home to the people that we really care about, that's when we start to lose it. And that stress manifests in irritability. We're snapping, we're a bit snarky, we're unable to actually just sit with the people that we love and listen to them, listen to and engage emotionally with them because we're so het up. We've all this built up stress and we don't know what to do with it. So we rush our children to bed if they're small, and then we plonk down and try and zone out while watching TV. So um, I think it's a great idea for anybody to maybe just have an honest look at how you think stress manifests for you in your life. Is it irritability? Is it forgetfulness? Is it exhaustion? One of the reasons the book is called Busy and Wrecked is because the word wrecked kept coming back to me from people in conversations. It's like, oh my God, I'm just so tired, I'm just wrecked. And I could hear people saying how wrecked they were and then asking other people for sort of validation. Are you wrecked too? Yes, I'm wrecked. And we spend our whole lives going, yes, I'm exhausted. Are you? And it just struck me as what a crazy way to be living our lives, So how does the stress manifest for you? And what are the things that steal your peace? That's what I talk about in the book. One of the tools in my deep space toolkit is peace and identifying those things in your life that are stealing your peace. And these are your stressors. One example I give for myself is alcohol. alcohol is a major peace pincher for me. It's something that magnifies stress. It amplifies the stress in my life. It amplifies the symptoms of stress. So my forgetfulness will ramp up. My irritability will ramp up. I know when I'm stressed, I feel more fearful. Instead of feeling excited about opportunities, I'll feel more anxious about them. So identifying peace pinchers and sometimes peace pinchers are people, are situations in our work, or a petty tyrant in the office. So identifying those things in our life that are stealing our peace, but that we allow in, can be a nice place to start as well, to see really how stress manifests for you and the things that are adding to it.
I like that, peace pinchers. It's really good. And sometimes people do have an expectation that you have to be at their behest all the time. I feel demands. I'm sure you feel demands. I'm sure everybody listening here feels demands. And some people are more demanding and they expect you to be at their beck and call. And they don't seem to have any consideration. Whereas there's other people who wouldn't be that way. So they would be the peace pinchers. They want a piece of you. And there's only one, there's only one of us and we have only so much time. It's tricky. And it's tricky because, say, for example, you're developing your brand and this is your livelihood. This is my livelihood. And we feel there's probably a fear of missing out in some ways, that if we don't say yes, we lose something that we're so dedicated to being able to provide for our family. How do you navigate that one?
I think it's a great question. I mean, everything starts with creating a little bit of space so that you can observe yourself and your behaviors. It took me a long time to realize that I had very strong people-pleasing tendencies. I think we all do to some extent, but mine are particularly pronounced, particularly when I was young, younger in my 20s and 30s. I was just one of those people. I was a chameleon people pleaser, which is someone who takes on the traits of people around them. So my accent would change, my behavior would change. And this can come from anywhere, with parts of your upbringing and a desire to please and being the youngest and trying to get noticed and all these kinds of things. I was definitely a victim of saying yes to everything, because, like particularly people who are self-employed, like you say, feel the need to say yes to things in case it generates a revenue stream that you're going to need down the line. For me, working in the media for over 20 years, I mean, that's one of those spaces where you really are encouraged to say yes to everything, foot in the door and all that kind of stuff. You throw enough stuff at the wall, something's got to stick. All these cliches we're familiar with. But they're real. So you can fall into habits, but from a young age of, coming out of college, of just saying, yeah, trying to get that break, keep saying yes. If someone asks you to do something that you don't want to do, it's a piece of work that maybe you feel you're not aligned to, but you say yes to it anyway, because you never know, there might be a contact there that's going to be useful. And before you know it, you're in your 40s and you're still running that programming. And for me, in 2017, I had begun meditating around 2011, and it had worked for me. But then, because I got busy and, I saw it as, something kind of there in the background, but not really a necessity, maybe something I could reach for, in case of emergency, break glass kind of thing. I let the meditation go. And next thing I know, because I'm still running this busy software of saying yes and being a people pleaser and never really taking the time to go, all right, look, what's important to me now for this stage of my life? I just was saying yes. And next thing I knew, I was burnt out and I was crying in my GP's office because I didn't know what was wrong with me, So I think that's when I decided I was going to lean into the stuff that I knew worked and actually treat it as a necessity and not just a little frill that I could use from time to time. And that's when I became a meditation teacher in 2018. So it is hard to say no to things. It is it does take a little bit of work to go, all right, where are the areas in my life where I'm actually contributing to my peace being stolen? Where are the things that I'm saying yes to? Who are the people who I'm allowing take a little bit more of my energy than maybe I'd like? How do I start to set a little, have a difficult conversation? Um, and I know, for instance, a story this week, right? I gave a car. I like classic cars, and I have a classic Jaguar, and I put this car into a garage, um, with a couple of guys I know run the garage, and this was at the end of January. And they said, and they're notoriously slow for coming back and doing the job, and all that typical mechanic stuff. So anyway, the car's in there, and I'm sending a little, hey, any word on the car? Trying to use my lightest, non-threatening WhatsApp speak, and oh yeah, waiting on a part there. It should be fixed by the blah blah blah. It is now July. I still don't have the car back, and I've had to sit myself down this week and go, okay, this is interesting. There's a people pleasing part of you that is afraid of confrontation and is tiptoeing around this. So you need to sit down with yourself now and say, okay, what's going to happen here? So long story short, I'm going in on Friday. I'm having the difficult conversation and I'm taking my car back. And I'm going to let these people know exactly what I think of them. Not in a harsh way, not in a, throwing stones through their windows, but I'm going to look them in the eye and tell them what I think of them. But, you know, that was an interesting example of here I am, I'm 52, and I'm still working on those parts of myself, where I would like to think that I had fixed, but I'm not. We're works in progress. So for me, that is one of those peace pinching aspects of my life is fear
Mhm.
of confrontation.
I can
Knowing
totally,
that,
and I think that's a huge one. And I'm just thinking there must be scenarios where there would be benefits in people role playing different situations and doing it in a safe environment to learn, because we all have situations that we have to confront. And probably with some of us that we wait for the situation to build up, build up, build up. And next thing is we're flying off the handle altogether. Whereas if we had intervened a lot sooner and stayed calm, and it's very practical stuff, isn't it? Just when you talk about it. And yet, I'm not aware, is there a service out there that actually provides that? Really, this should be taught in school, because dealing with people is something that we have to do all our life. Even sitting down with our wife, sitting down with husband, that kind of way. Like, it's very, very practical. Yeah,
yeah.
it's good.
Sometimes I think we can see it in our children quicker than we see it in ourselves. You might have a child and you see they have a friend and you can see the friend is a little bit of controlling behavior, and you
Mm,
see your own child kind of running around doing things for them and playing by their rules. And you're like, hey, don't let this person boss you around now. You stand your ground and la la la. We're very quick to point it out in our children, but actually we can be experiencing it in our work lives where we have someone in work who we know is taking chunks out of us and we can't seem to stop it. You know,
yeah,
um, maybe it's a best friend who just every time we're with them, we suddenly regress into now we're 14 again, and they're telling us what to do, and so I think we can see it quicker in other people than ourselves. But still, I think all these things are wonderful opportunities to work on this stuff with ourselves, and
yeah,
again, those things that thing with my car is a source of stress because it's always in the back of our mind. And if I don't deal with it, if I don't address this people pleasing tendency in me, that's going to add to my stress. Now, it's not a huge thing, but if that's piled onto three or four other big things, now your little Jenga tower is getting a little bit more wobbly. So, again, what are the peace pinchers? Where are you people pleasing? And these things can really help us deal with a sense of busyness and overwhelm.
yeah, yeah. So you started doing your own personal meditation back in 2011. And your breathing as well, because we've worked together in terms of you're familiar with our work with Oxygen Advantage. And I'd love to kind of get when you started off, because it can be frustrating enough, mindfulness or focused attention on the breath. Can you give some, and I sometimes feel as well, Dermot, that there's a lot of kind of, I don't know, misunderstanding about the whole concept, that you don't necessarily have to be doing it sitting in the lotus position, sitting on a cushion, sitting with all of the paraphernalia, that it's nothing about that. It's literally just doing anything that you can get out of your head, and not to be just driving those thoughts, that rumination that's happening in the background. And I think about 50% of our time we're stuck in our head, and stuck in our head is not a nice place to be. So your venture of getting out of your head, how was that for you? Was there kind of, I'm sure it didn't go in a smooth line, so I'll leave that to you.
No, it never does. And look, I'm a stand-up comedian. So, at the time, even though I knew I needed to do something to help myself manage stress, I was really cynical about meditation. I thought it was really fluffy, you know. Mindfulness, I guess back then wasn't a term that was used very often, and it sounded even more fluffy and out there. And yeah, I was hugely cynical. But thankfully, I'm the woman who got me into meditation. Uh, was a writer, and she had asked me to just MC her book launch, and she'd written a novel, nothing to do with meditation. But through chatting to her, I found out that she was teaching meditation to the Gardaí, to the Irish police force. And I was thinking, really? I didn't know this. I thought it was just for kind of hippie types. Um, and I was thinking, well, I have a lot of respect for the Gardaí, so maybe I should open my mind a little bit. And around the time, I remember picking up a small book by Deepak Chopra, The Seven Spiritual Laws for Success, and that resonated with me. I liked that it was a short book. It was something I could pick up and dip into and put down. Some of the ideas were starting to resonate with me a little bit. So I just tried the meditation. And yeah, of course, if you've been practicing distraction for decades, then sitting down, focusing on your breath, even for a few seconds, is going to feel super weird. You know, when we're small kids, we'll lie on the grass on our bellies and look in great detail at a blade of grass and watch a beetle crawling over a flower or something. I mean, that's pure mindfulness in action, and that's how we're naturally wired. But we get busy, we get distracted, we get told about exams, we're handed a phone, and off we go. Um, so I guess it's a skill that we have to relearn. So it was like that for me. But it definitely for me, I found that it was like when you start to exercise, when you start to work out a bit, you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you're thinking, ugh, nothing's really happening. But then you meet people and they're like, whoa, what's going on with you? You're in great shape. And you're like, really? Oh, I didn't think anything was happening. And it's the same for meditation, I think. You may think you're still the busy basket case you always were, but somebody will say to you, what are you doing? You seem a little bit different. You seem a little bit more grounded or something. What's going on with you? And you're like, oh, it was my wife Karina who pointed it out for me, how this stuff was starting to work before I knew notice anything. And this was literally within a few weeks of me just starting to do a few exercises at nighttime. I used to go into my office, where I was doing some work in a house we were in at the time, and I just started repeating mantras. That's how I started. Um, and I noticed that when I did that, my breathing slowed down and everything started to slow down, and my mind started going to some interesting, strange places. But I didn't think it was having necessarily a massive ripple effect into my real life. But it was Karina who said, and my kids were very small at the time. She's like, "Have you seen how relaxed you are at bedtime?" And this points to a little bit of what we were talking about earlier in terms of that lady who said, when I come through the front door of my house, I unleash hell on the people I love. What's happening? So for me, that's how I was. I would work in a high stress, media environment, radio, TV, whatever it was, stand up comedy. And when I came home, I was like, and I would just, come on, just get the kids to bed so I can just flop down on the couch. I can't be dealing with the noise and the not putting on your pajamas and all that. But Karina was like, "You're so chill now." And she was right. I not only was I not rushing through potential golden personal moments with the people that I love, I was present. I was enjoying it. I didn't want my kids to go to bed because I was having fun with them, and that may seem like a small, innocuous thing, but this is life. It's whatever. Even if you don't have kids, what are your golden moments? These are the things we think about on our deathbed. How was I with the people that I cared about? Not,
Mm.
how were my quarter four projections, and sales targets? And those things are important in terms of, our day to day. But, at the end of life, those are the things we'll be thinking about. It was like, how was I around the people that matter the most? And if meditation and breath work are tools that can get us to a space where we're actually present and there and not losing the rag and being that version of ourselves that makes us, feel guilty or shamed, then that's got to be a help. So, um, I guess, yes, it can feel clunky and difficult at the start when you begin any of the techniques that you know so well as well. But never underestimate the ripple effect that can have in all areas of your life, Um, Interesting, another manifestation of it, but from a work sense, outside of the home. I had a boss in my previous job who came to me and said, "What's going on with you? You're different." And I was like, "What?" Because I thought I was still the same. And he goes, "I used to love negotiating salary with you because you were so visibly uncomfortable that you would agree to anything." And I was like, "Really?" And I remember I would go in and sit with my boss, people pleaser, oh my God, authority figure, confrontation, eye contact, all the things I wasn't comfortable with. I would sweat, I'd blather. I would then try to people please my way through my own negotiation, which would mean I would make his job a whole lot easier. And I'd walk out of there feeling like, oh, I had totally undersold my self-worth. And I was now on an annual salary that was far less than I thought I deserved. But that's how it went. And after a few years into meditating, he's like, "I hate negotiating with you because you sit there and you say nothing." And I became, as a result of creating space in my breath and in my day and in my thinking, I created space in those difficult conversations where I was able to just be present and maintain eye contact and feel grounded in myself, to the point where actually now it was flipping back on him and he was giving in to me and I didn't even have to do very much. So there was a lovely example, a real life example, of those moments in work where this stuff really can have a tangible financial benefit, because I walked out of there with more money than I thought I was going to get. And it was absolutely down to my ability to sit with myself and sit in what I would have seen previously as an extremely uncomfortable situation, and not react from a place of stress, but a place of groundedness and self awareness, and that's massive.
It's massive as well because the situation was the same, but all you had changed was your mindset, not even changing mindset. So you're not replacing thoughts with thoughts. You spend time getting out of your head. You spend time bringing attention to your senses. Okay, you started off with a mantra, but a change happens and the mind isn't quite as busy. And that allows you then to hold your attention on what you want to hold it upon and also to self-regulate. It's an amazing tool. So earlier on, we were talking about the peace pinchers, and the peace pinchers are on one hand, but our ability to deal with the peace pinchers or to deal with the workload or to deal with the projects, because I find in my own, like I was explaining, I have a chapter to write for a medical textbook. And I got the word of it last Sunday and I have 2 weeks to write it. It's 10,000 words and it's scientific. We're doing a new course. We're doing a new OA course, and I've just finished a sleep book. And I've got meetings and this, that, and the other. And sometimes I feel, oh my God, like this is just one thing after another. But I don't know how I would cope with it unless I was using breathing and unless I was making a concerted effort to get out of my head. And that's what I was interested in as well. When you started getting out of your head, did you find the tendency for the mind to wander? And of course you would have, but how did you deal with it? Did it kind of frustrate you? Did you ever feel at the point that you were getting nowhere with it? I know you said that you've seen changes. You obviously stuck with it 6 or 7 weeks. But I'm just thinking about somebody who's starting it off, because I remember my first 20 minutes. Like, I didn't have, my attention was not good. Like, a thought would come into my mind every 2 to 3 seconds, which is kind of weird because I've put this out to our own groups of OA instructors, and I've asked them, we measure how many times does your mind wander over the course of 3 minutes? And people come back and say, my mind has wandered 10 times or 15 times. That'll be often the highest. I said, Jesus, these people must be enlightened nearly. Because my mind would have been wandering about 30 times a minute, kind of thing. You know that? So you trained your brain. Have you noticed a change in that aspect of it? That it's not just that you're having directed, it's not just that you're having to direct your attention, but the tendency for the mind to wander has significantly reduced. I'd love to know about your personal life. So when you wake up in the morning, how do you bring it into your personal life? And do you do a formal practice? And personally, I don't. Well, I do it kind of informal, in terms of physical exercise, but how do you do it?
Like, what would my practice look like in general?
Yeah, so in terms of, do you do a formal practice, or do you have a tendency that throughout your day you'll bring attention onto the breath? What do you do with your breathing? Do you breathe in and out through your nose? Do you have your mouth closed during sleep, by the way? So all of the things that you bring in, what's your toolbox in terms of helping to bring a quietness to the mind?
It's a great question because it has evolved for me over the last 15 years or so. I guess initially I really tried to lock in a practice. So I was doing every morning, I would start it small, and that's what I always encourage people to do. The first meditation I learned was box breathing. Square breathing, it's called. And as well, my teacher taught it to me as 16 seconds. And I loved the idea that you could meditate in 16 seconds because the idea was always that you have to do an hour and it has to be on a mountaintop and in a beautiful location, and you have to be wearing 500 euro Lululemon yoga pants. But no, the fact that I could do 16 seconds somewhere, and actually Navy SEALs were using it and they were calling it tactical breathing, which sounds really cool, you know. So I started there, and then I went a little bit longer, and I got curious about different styles. So I tried mantras, so just syllables or words or phrases you repeat silently in your mind over and over again. I started to use the breathing techniques and see how much my mind wandered, with different styles. So I kind of saw it from a experimental point of view. So what I noticed was that my mind wandered less if I combined a mantra with my breath. So I gave it two anchors. Because, like you, my mind was all over the place. So I reckon the more tethers, like a tent at a windy music festival, the more ways we can tie it down, the less it's going to fly off. So that worked for me. And then over time, other elements have been coming in. So obviously, I came across your work and I thought that sounded fascinating. And I'm lucky enough to have experienced your teacher training, which I'm in the middle of at the moment. And I think it's massively important. Nasal breathing has been huge for me, actually, just in terms of I guess adding another one of those anchors, it's almost like a constant state of mindfulness that I'm bringing myself back to the whole time, just by reminding myself, mouth breathe, mouth breathe. And obviously, if I'm on a Zoom call, or sorry, nose breathe, sorry, nose breathe. On a call with you at the moment, I'm hyper conscious that I'm doing my best to nasal breathe as much as possible. Small things. I noticed that, uh, you know, if, in exercise classes, if I nasal breathe as much as I can during those in the gym, I was doing it this week. How I feel after the training session is completely different. Sometimes after, if I have a sense that I'm mouth breathing when I exercise, I'm more prone to feeling like I've over exercised. My body's a bit rattled after it. I feel kind of anxious and a little bit in a heightened stress response rather than a lovely post-exercise sort of, rest and digest state. So that's huge for me. So I feel not only am I being more mindful in the exercise itself, but afterwards I feel the benefits of that. I mouth tape at nighttime with your myo tape, uh, which also I just feel better as a result of that. So I guess over the years I'm really more acutely aware of the power of the mini moments of meditation rather than I do this big session in the morning and I do another session later in the afternoon. It's the mini moments. So though whether that's I connect in through remembering to nasal breathe, or whether that's literally just creating a moment where I'm looking around, where I'm appreciating where I am, or if I'm in a conversation, I'm actually in the conversation. So it's the process of, yes, it's important to me to connect in to do my meditation practice, in regular chunks, but also actually it's those mini moments I find have possibly are the most powerful and have the most benefits.
Like really, when it comes down to it, the mind, and we spoke about it earlier on, we're either stuck in our head thinking or we're not. And if we're not thinking, we're attending to our senses. So looking but not looking through the veil of thought, listening but not listening through a veil of thought, or bringing attention into the body. So what you've made it your way of life, and I don't think you're going to stop with this. I think this is a tool that you're going to use for the rest of your life. And I think the benefits, it's not that I think, I'm pretty sure, that you will continue with this because I feel the same way. But then I have to wonder, Dermot, how has it been overlooked? And I'm not sure, have you ever thought about that? We spent 12, 13 years in formal education. We spent all of those years developing the mind, and yet we never differentiated between rumination of the mind and practical thinking. And rumination that could be very harmful for people and is very harmful for people. It's almost a shame that if there was a class a week or 2 classes a week just devoted to that, because that class alone, if it was presented in a way, that class alone then would help with all of the other subjects. How have we overlooked this one? None of this is new, but yet you said even mindfulness back in 2011, and I agree with you. I was doing, I put out courses, you take up mindfulness back in with the economic crash here. Men would not turn up because they felt it wasn't for them. Mainly it was women that turned up, in fairness to them, and quite a few did. Have you ever wondered, why has it taken so long to get to this point?
I have a big issue with the way it's marketed. It was almost hijacked. And I know, like you, I mean, I've spent the last 15 years going to spiritual events, meditation events, wellness events. And I'm so used to being the guy or the other guy, and a lot of the time it's a male teacher.
Guy.
Yeah.
It's a t-shirt, Dermot.
Yeah. Yeah. But a lot of the time too, the teacher is male often, but yet the audience is almost completely female. And it's weird, and I think that is because the language around breath work, meditation, the mind-body connection, finding peace, stepping out of busyness. It's just been marketed in a very particular way. A lot of the language around it is fluffy. It's very female skewed. And it's not that, women don't deserve this or need the benefits of it, as much. We all do. But I think it's left a lot of people out of the conversation. You just have to look at the demographic of a room like that. There's no men, or very few. And so I think what's nice now, and I think what's so important about what Oxygen Advantage is doing and the work you're doing, is that you're presenting this information in a way that's accessible to more people. And that's the simplicity of it is what helps it to win. It's what I've tried to do with my books, is use humor as the vehicle to bring people into the conversation that normally feel left out of it, because I felt left out of it. I couldn't see how any of this related to me. And some people are into the incense and that side of stuff. And if you want, and I like it myself from time to time. But if you're not, how do you get access to this stuff, And I think that's why it hasn't resonated and hasn't connected. But I think there's been massive strides in the last 20 years. There's no doubt. There's huge awareness around it. But I still think a lot of the time we're stuck in that crisis management mode, that we wait until we're in emergency, or we're overwhelmed, or we're burnt out. And it's funny, the difference between, say, the athletic world and the Joe Bloggs world is that I think areas like sport and law enforcement and the military understand that we do this, it gives us this positive benefit. We do this and it increases performance. And, I've been lucky enough to share some guided meditations with UN peacekeepers over in the Lebanon, and they understand, what, this is a necessary tool just as much as the stuff in my kit. We need to do this at nighttime so that it helps us to sleep and we can function and, look after ourselves and each other and the other people we're there to mind better. Whereas in normal life, it's almost seen as sort of, when things start to break down, you need to do this. Chronic anxiety, try this. It's like a sticking plaster. Whereas we don't learn it the other way is like, no, these are, we don't need to get to crisis point. We introduce this stuff just like you do healthy eating or fitness or whatever, and everything improves. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's like crisis management here, but performance in other areas. And I do think that's changing. And obviously Oxygen Advantage is massive in that space. It's why I want to become a teacher, is because it's really focused on the positive benefits as opposed to crisis management. And I think a lot of the mental health talk is in around there, which is necessary when things get really bad. But actually, there's a lot more we can do in the, before we get to that place.
Yeah, thanks for that. Because, I'm just thinking about some people who might be new or kind of to that whole world, and they're wondering, is it relevant to them or not? And it's massively relevant. Oftentimes, like, I totally agree with you. I think there is a misunderstanding out there about breathing. What is breathing? What is meditation? Like, it's simple, but it's complex. But the main thing is that the language should be used in a way that anybody who's listening to it is saying, there's something in this. It's really about training the brain. It's about training your mind. It's about developing your capacity to concentrate. It's about being able to deal with stress. It's about being able to improve your sleep quality, to improve your energy levels, to hold your attention. Like, it's massive tools that we as human beings really need. And even if we're just relating one person to another, it's very distracting if we're talking to another person and that person's looking around them. They're distracted. And we can feel it. We may not say anything to the individual, but we can feel it. That person isn't even listening to me because that person is so stuck in their heads. But of course, that person doesn't even realize it. And if they're that stuck in their head, it's also a recipe for unhappiness, because I heard you talking about that study by Harvard as well. In terms of they tracked people and they asked them, are you doing something? Yeah. Are you doing one thing, but thinking about something else? And it was very common for people's minds to wander. But the people whose minds wandered the most were least happy because they're stuck in their heads all the time. And then we need to differentiate between the practical thinking to solve a puzzle, thinking to solve an issue. But even that can become unproductive. So in terms of then, when you're feeling that your head is heavy, you have a strategy that works well for you. And I liked actually, you said that the brain doesn't sort the very thing that you want to sort out. It's not sorted out by thinking about it, put it that way. If you're overthinking, thinking about it isn't going to sort out the overthinking. So what do you do then to get out of your head?
Yeah, it's really not not relying on a busy mind to get you out of that busy mind. So for me, I have to just get into my body. And For instance, last night I was feeling a little bit agitated, a little bit addled. I don't know why. I just had that sense. So for me, that's my cue. Okay, stop thinking about stuff. Just come out here to this little room and just connect in with my breathing. Sometimes I would just sit there with my hand on my belly and just allow that breath to slow down and do some of that nice, light, slow, deep breathing. Sometimes, if I'm feeling it particularly acutely, I'll actually get down on the floor. I'll get into child's pose, and I find for just putting my forehead on the floor and then allowing that breathing to slow down, that's a massive help for me. And particularly at a stage of my life when I was waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning every single night. And I'm sure some people watching or listening to this can relate to that. There's those torturous periods of our life where we don't even have to look at the clock. We just know what time it is. For me, it was 10 past 3 in the morning. That was my time, my special time to be alive. And it was only when I discovered that rather than lying there thinking, trying to think my way back to sleep and think my way out of stress, that I could get out of the bed, get onto the floor, put my forehead there, and start breathing gently into my belly. And if I did that for 10 minutes or so and got back into the bed, bang, I was gone. And that's transformative. If your sleep can improve through a little bit of breathing or by doing something like that, your whole week improves, your life improves, because you're not a basket case running around telling everyone how wrecked you are, So my advice for anybody doing this is try and use the body to get out of your head. Don't try and think your way out of a thinking mind. And start really small. Just start with a couple of breaths. Do it between Zoom calls. Do it between those Teams calls that rule our lives these days. And I think you'll be really surprised at that ripple effect that we often underestimate.
It's been a pleasure, Dermot. And thanks so much for your contribution. I think it was a really interesting conversation, navigating the whole aspect of getting out of our heads. We kept it simple, which I really like. And of course, between the two of us, we would encourage people to absolutely bring this into your way of life. There's nothing woo-woo about it. I like that you spoke about that. It is for everybody. It should be in the education system. And it should be communicated in a way that children absolutely get it, even if at the start, that they kind of feel that it's not for them. Well, maybe they also feel that geography is not for them or history is not for them. It should be a subject like any other subject that we have for life. Your book behind you, Busy and Wrecked, how can people buy it?
It's available wherever you get your books. It's also on audiobook on Audible and anywhere else you get your audiobooks. There are 12 free guided meditations by me in the book that we get access to. So if people are curious and they're new to meditation, guided meditation is a lovely way to go. And actually, if you get Busy and Wrecked, you also get access to all the free meditations from my first book, Mindful, as well. So you'll get the whole kit and caboodle, which is great. And for any of your international listeners, particularly your Australian ones, I will be doing Busy and Wrecked, the live show, which is a blend of stand-up comedy and meditation, which is my thing these days. I'll be doing that in Sydney in November, on November the 28th. So if anybody is in that neck of the woods and wants to come along and see me live, just go to dermotwhelan.com for all the info.
Because we have quite a few instructors in Sydney. So yeah, I'm sure people will be listening to it. I'm not sure if Caroline McKenna is listening right now. She's often down in that neck of the woods. So yeah, great. So Dermot, pleasure. Thanks very much. And also your website is dermotwhelan.com.
That's it. Thanks so much, Patrick. Keep up the great work. And I promise to do my Oxygen Advantage homework.
I'll be paying attention to that one, so I will. Waiting for that exam result to come in. No pressure, Dermot.
Thanks a million.
Thank you for listening to the Oxygen Advantage podcast. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and maybe take the time to leave us a review. The Oxygen Advantage podcast is available from all your podcast providers.